See, that's how people do it, try to get out of it. But if you don't really want anything.
Good morning. Morning. I'm going to just introduce myself, and then I'm going to give you a question so you can continue conversation while you eat. So I was here last year, so some of you might remember me from last year. My name is Sherry Parker Lewis, and I'm the director for church relations for the United Methodist Foundation of Michigan. It's a part-time job. The other part, I'm retired, and I'm retired with my husband, Reverend George Lewis. We're both retired clergy from the United Methodist Church. George says now his job is road crew, so he hauls around equipment. So I had the opportunity to speak in a lot of churches. I was at Green Street in Hastings last week, and coming up, I'll be at Midwood, which is actually my home church now, which is in Kalamazoo. We live in Mattawan. I served for 29 years as a pastor. George has served 30, so he does have 1 year on me and therefore more expertise in that field. For the foundation, what I do is talk to churches about finance, financial practices, stewardship, and I also talk about planned giving. In addition, I just have a great delight to work with clergy one-on-one because we believe that strong clergy leaders have good finances too. And so I work with clergy on their personal finances and have a great time doing that. Today, I've been invited by your endowment committee to talk a little bit about planned giving. I want to just remind you that I guess I'll stand over here. The United Methodist Foundation its goal is to help faithful people live generous lives. And so what we do is we help by helping churches in the Wesleyan tradition in investments and parachurch organizations and individuals as well. Our investment policies are in line with the values of the Methodist Church, the United Methodist Church. And so we do very careful investing. And I know that your endowment is a part of our investments. And so we're working hard for you. We also work very hard to equip churches and clergy leaders to be the best that they can be. So here's a question I invite you to talk about for a few minutes as you finish your meal, is I'm wondering if you might share a story of the congregation that brought you to faith. Okay, so it might be this congregation, or it might be a congregation in another state, another place. But what congregation were you with when you came to faith in Jesus Christ? So go ahead and just share that story with the people around you. I want to talk a little bit more. So- Yeah. All right, well, I'm going to start talking and I do have another question coming up. But if you need to leave, don't worry. If you need, well, maybe the endowment committee doesn't want you to, but if you need to leave, don't worry. If if you haven't had dessert yet and you're doing that or you're getting seconds, I won't point you out if you come to the table. So that's okay. So I'm curious now, you've had a little chance to talk about that place that brought you to the faith. So the first thing I want to check, is there anyone here that St. Paul's is the place? Oh my gosh, praise be to God. So how many years have you been a member? Can someone shout out how many years? You think about it. Adding 24 years? Any more than 24? A lot. I hear a lot. All right. So tell me give me another church that you've heard this morning spoken of fondly. I talked with Sarah. Sarah talked about Tabernacle Church that brought her to faith. Is there anyone else that has a church that you talked fondly about today? Yes. Cross, basketball hoop. What will it be? And any other church that you remember fondly? Yes. Oh my goodness. Is that who brought you to faith at that church? I love it. Oh, oh. Well, for me, it was Lexington United Methodist Church over in the Thumb. I was raised in the Episcopal Church, and but there was no youth group in the Episcopal Church. But whoa, they had a happening one at that little Lexington United Methodist Church. So I joined there and came to faith through a lay witness program, and that was when I was 16 years old. If I can borrow George's story, another story of Hope United Methodist Church, raised Catholic and came to faith as a young man through United Methodist Church and the ministry there. And so we understand having a fondness in our hearts for churches. Now, I want to tell you that I'm going to speak a little bit about legacy. I want you to think about the churches that have touched your lives. I'll tell you a story from the Bible. Paul was founding churches all around the Mediterranean, the Eastern Mediterranean. And one of the places that he went was Corinth. So he established a church there and left. And he started to hear that there was some trouble. There were all kinds of things that the people were arguing about. There was infighting. And one of them was who was really the founder of the church, because there had been some other people there. And Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians, he said, yeah, I may have planted the church, right? And there's this other guy named Apollos who gave information, and he was there too. But we're not the people that you follow, because God gives the growth. And so after he had said this, he said this: for we are co-workers in God's service. You are God's field, God's building. By the grace God has given me, I laid a foundation as a wise builder, and someone else is building on it, but each one should build with care. It's interesting to think that there were people at those churches when we came to faith who were there already building on a foundation that someone else had established, whether it was a real and true brick foundation or on a basketball court. Someone else was there before them building that foundation, and we as the faithful continue to build. God gives the growth, but we are brick by brick always building the church. Some people talk about a legacy, and I like to think of legacy is first what I have experienced through the faithful people of Lexington United Methodist Church, the faithful people of a little tiny country church called Churchill United Methodist Church, not far from West Branch, who urged me into ministry. I was a teacher, urged me into ministry because they saw something in me that I did not see in myself. And I give thanks for their legacy that's brought me to this place. Now, I am of the age where I am receiving Medicare advertisements. So I'm almost 65. And it's time for me to start thinking about what legacy will I leave as those who have come before me have brought me to this faith and this wonderful life in the abundance of Jesus Christ. And so I'm wondering what our legacy will be. Now, I'm going to ask you a question just about this, and I'll tell you the story. Just recently talked with my mother. My mother is 86 years old. At the beginning of the year, she started living in assisted living. It was a very difficult transition, but I think that she's more comfortable, and we're comfortable knowing that she's safe and cared for. And I was recently talking with her in her room. She was in her chair, you know, that lazy boy chair with the buttons that brings her feet up. She's sitting in the chair. And I said, "What do you want to be remembered for?" And she thought a little bit. And she said, I want to be remembered that I was kind. I said, okay, yeah. You were kind. You are kind. My mom always told us not to say bad things about people, and she practiced it. She's much kinder than I am. She's very kind. And then she said, I want to be remembered as generous. Now, my mother worked in a factory. She was widowed in her mid-40s, finished raising the family. She lived in a little humble house. Her pension is humble. Her savings are humble. And so some people might say, well, there's no way you can be generous. How get you don't have anything to be generous with. And yet I think that generosity is a spiritual gift. And it goes beyond our funds available, doesn't it? Our wealth or our income. It goes to the people who provided food today. Thank you so much. And all the people I saw serving in worship to make worship possible. It goes to everything that the church does and beyond that in our generosity to our loved ones, our family, our children, our brothers and sisters. So my mom said, my legacy, I want to be kindness and generosity. So I'm curious. I'm not trying to trap you here because obviously I'm going to talk a little bit about generosity. But I'd like you to spend a few minutes now talking to your neighbors about when you're gone, what will your legacy be? What would you like it to be? You might think of it in terms of what will be the eulogy values? What will they talk about in my eulogy? So go ahead and say that. Talk about that for a few minutes. All right. Well, my hope is you've heard some great hopes. Sharon, can I share yours? Oh, can I share what you share? Can I say what you said when we talked? Okay. So Sharon said she has had a life of caring for people as a nurse's assistant and then caring for her parents until they passed. And so her hope is that she will be remembered as a person who cared. Isn't that lovely? What other words did you hear? And you can shout out your neighbors if you wanted. What do people want to be remembered for? Oh, excellent. A good listener. Empathy. Yes. Lovely. Bree, are you taking notes? What is it? Others? Oh, knitting people together. That's lovely. What a lovely image. Except for the pointy needles. Yeah. Martin Luther King, just days before he was assassinated, someone asked him what he wanted to be remembered for. And he said, in my eulogy, there just needs to be 3 words. He was faithful. And that's enough. That's enough. So for some of you, it might have been faithful. For others, it may have been generosity, helpful. My hope is that my legacy might be one of curiosity, that people will continue to learn and to ask questions. So we all have that kind of thing in mind. So the question is, when we think about the churches that have supported us, the churches that we love, not only the ones that have brought us to faith, but have brought us through the happiest times in our lives and the most difficult times in our lives, what legacy will we leave? Now, I have to tell you that when I talk with groups of pastors, I suggest that they put in their will something for the church that brought them to faith or the one that called them to ministry. I suggest they do that simply to pass on the legacy of the gift that they have been given. And if your church that brought you to faith is still going strong, you might think, wow, I never thought about thanking that congregation for the life I've had. Maybe I should do that. Or perhaps a church that had an amazing point, was with you at an amazing turning point in your life, that you might recognize that with a gift. Or because you have decided to be members here, to be connected with this community of faith, you might ask, what kind of legacy will I leave so that this church might continue to bring people to Jesus Christ, and for this community in this area make a difference? And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that kind of legacy and about giving. But as I do, I'm going to talk about finances. But as I do, I'd like you to think a little bit broader, not just about, oh, yeah, I got a life insurance policy. Maybe I could change the beneficiary. Not just that, but that broader question of what am I called to do to leave a legacy in my life, and who needs to be recognized? What institutions need to be recognized for the differences that they've made? So I want to just start very quickly by talking about why people give. Because you might be saying, well, yeah, I'm going to leave a legacy for my kids. It's all set. I know exactly what I'm doing because that's what we do. And we sometimes assume that's only rich people, give to other things other than their kids. But there are a number of reasons why we might give. We give this on a regular basis to support our community of faith now, and it might be for legacy giving too. So giving can be an act of worship, right? We just give so that as we do that, we're worshiping God. It can be an act of gratitude for Thanksgiving. As I've said, Thanksgiving for what a church, what a community of faith has done for us. It can be an act of spiritual discipline to say, in the Methodist tradition, we say that if you want to grow closer to the grace of God, there are some practices that you can do that will heighten your awareness of God's grace. And spiritual disciplines include prayer and Bible reading and worship and taking communion or being baptized. But another one is a spiritual discipline of generosity. How many of us have been on mission trips or helped with a special project here at the church, and we have glimpsed the Spirit of God working because of our volunteer efforts? And so we can do that in all kinds of generous ways. Another way, and I love this, is that giving can be an act of hope. And so we might say, I'm giving so that the congregation may continue to make a difference because I have great hope in the power of God in this ministry. So it can be an act of hope. It also can be an expression of faith that we're faithful. That's why we give. That's why we give on a weekly basis or a monthly basis or perhaps annually we give. But it can also be an expression of faith that we demonstrate for those who go after us. So we might say, well, the children, the grandchildren, not so connected. But one of the things I'm going to demonstrate to them is even in my legacy, my financial legacy, I'm going to demonstrate how important faith was to me. So it can be that. It can also, this is kind of crazy, but it's not so much United Methodists talk about this, but giving can be an act of renunciation. Giving can be to say, I am not going to let money have control over me. I'm not going to let my time be sucked up by all kinds of things that this world has. I am going to purposely give that to God. My skills, my gifts, my time, my resources. I'm going to renounce that from burdening me or tying me up. And also, it can be the support of the body of Christ. And I love that your endowment, I heard today, is a matching gift for an ongoing ministry. Man, what a great way to use that. And the people that have given to that endowment to support it, and I would imagine that that's not only bequests, but people who have given to the endowment are giving lasting gifts that are making a difference in this community. They're supporting the work of the body of Christ. So I'm going to talk a little bit about planned giving. And it was so interesting. Jeff was with us earlier, and Jeff said, now, you're going to talk about what we do with money when we die. I said, well, yeah, that's kind of depressing, isn't it? But the thing is that planned giving isn't just like when we die. It's just the opposite of unplanned giving, right? So unplanned giving, you hear about a ministry and you hand it over. Someone says, I need you to come to my house right now and move this dresser. You go over there and do it, right? Well, not all of us, but some of us could. So that's an unplanned kind of thing, but you just do it as a spontaneous gift. But planned giving, especially financial, takes into consideration your finances, your family, tax implications, institution connection, all of that. It takes that into, so you might say, yeah, I am talking about when you die, but I might be just talking about you got some stock to cash in and you're trying to figure out what to do with it in terms of tax implications. I might be talking about, I'm just feeling this well of gratitude for the church, and I'm going to just give a little bit beyond my tithe to something, and I want to just do that in the best way I can. That's planned giving as well. So there are some myths that go with planned giving, and I've talked a little bit about those. First of all, the only people that make planned gifts are wealthy people. That the only way that you would leave a bequest is if you have no heirs, because if you have heirs, of course they get everything. And also that every attorney and financial advisor knows about the value of charitable gifts. The thing is that there are some ways that you can give to charity beforehand. I'm going to talk about those very quickly, but and certainly talk with your financial advisors, your attorneys, all of those people as you're making those. But I've got some pamphlets on the table. If any of these things interest you, that you might just look into some other options. And those who are not wealthy don't need to consider a plan or estate plan. And I'm not any kind of lawyer, and I'm not even going there. But I would just say it's good to have a plan and to have that. And that plan gifts are always deferred, not always, right? I served for many years, and I loved when we would say, because this would happen, we need another roof. And someone would come and say, I just got this inheritance. We'll give half the cost of the roof. Seriously. So sometimes those things just, they come up. They don't have to wait. Okay, so why planned giving? You can use charitable giving to create retirement income. I'll say a little bit about that. And you want some retirement income. You can use it. You can plan your giving so that you have the least amount of tax burden. Sometimes plan giving has to do with asset management. Like what do I do with this thing or this thing? And there's some ideas. And then for some people, it's simply peace of mind. Like, okay, so you want to know I know what the plan is. No matter what happens to me, I know the plan. I know how I've remembered charitable institutions, including my church. I just know. So sometimes that's helpful. So there are ways that you can give now. Cash. Cash is always good. Is a treasurer here? You'll take cash? Okay. Yeah. So, and right, there you go. So sometimes we find that we just have an abundance and a thankful heart. And so we just say, all right, we're going to do this thing. Stock is another way that you can give. If you've had some stock that's been sitting for a long time and you're like, well, I don't know, we could cash it in, but of course, if you cash it in, there's a capital gains tax and all of that. But there are some ways that you can give that directly to the church, and talk with your treasurer about that. And Linda, I can tell you, the foundation can help with that. I won't go into that, but there are ways that can happen. The individual retirement account, how many people are familiar with the required minimum distribution? We have a few people here. All right. So when you turn 73, if you have a 401k or like you're required to do a minimum distribution from that account. And so some people will just send that directly to the church and that becomes part of their tithe. Other people will take that required minimum distribution and say, this will be my gift above my tithe. I talked with a lovely woman up here in West Michigan, up on the lake north of here. And she gets a pretty significant amount in RMD every year. And so she listens carefully through the year. And at the end of the year, she gives that money to the church in the area where it's most needed. She has a planned giving in. Because it's going directly, she misses some of the tax implications of that. Also, you can do a charitable rollover, and while I'm not going to do in a lot of details about that, if you're interested in that, we our executive director, David Bell, would help anyone individually with this for no cost, just to offer advice. I'm the presenter, he's the guy, he's the machine who knows the stuff. So also, you can give real estate. There are some things that are difficult, like a cemetery plot. No, but if you have a cottage or a lot that is not, it's hanging out there, you're paying taxes on it, and you're not really using it, that can be given to the church. And there are some tax things there too. And then tangible personal property. And so there's a great benefit to doing that. I'll first say something about the tax benefits of a stock gift. Let's say that you bought a stock at $2,000 and its fair market value right now is $10,000. So that's an $8,000 capital gain. And let's say you do a 15% capital gain rate, that's $1,200 worth of tax to cash it in. So you have $10,000 worth of stock, and you're going to pay $1,200 and get $8,800. If you don't sell the stock, but give the stock to the church, then the church receives an additional gift, and you get an additional tax savings for the charitable gift. So I'm not any kind of financial advisor, professional at all, but this might be something, if you've got, like, again, just some stock holdings you've had, you're like, yeah, what should I do with these? This might be something to think about as a way to give the church in a generous way. The other thing to think about are these questions. What do I own? Do I need it? Could it be a charitable gift? Now, there are all kinds of things, and this is just silly. This is just a big, long list of anything that you could give that would be worth something to the church. So a couple of stories. I don't know if you're familiar with God's Country Cooperative Parish. So God's Country Cooperative Parish is up in the UP around Paradise, Michigan. It's a cooperative United Methodist parish, big mission group up there. And so they got, I wish I could remember what model it was, but they got this super antique car. And now it was not a gift for the pastors up there, nor was it a gift to just take to car shows, with a magnetic United Methodist Church sign on it. It was a gift to sell. And so they sold it for a good amount of money, and that money went to the mission at God's Country Cooperative Parish. Sometimes our cars don't exactly do that. I'm going to pick on George. George had a Buick LeSabre maroon. For those are car people, a LeSabre engine, a Buick engine goes forever, ever. He'd driven, I see a few nods. He had driven moon miles. He'd driven that car enough that it had driven to the moon and back. Maybe you've had one like that. One day it just stopped and it sat in our driveway. And I knew that pretty soon we were going to get a letter from the subdivision. Every once in a while he'd go out and he'd just look at it. And I said, finally, we have to do something with this car. And so we decided to actually give it to public radio. And they came with a wrecker and they put it on the bed of the wrecker. And it was a bad time. George wiped tears from his eyes. And so my guess is that car was taken right to wherever they crushed them. Sorry. But as we called it, yes. Oh, those things you would keep. Those are not to give away. So I'm just talking about giving away. So anyway, the car, you get to claim what they get for the car. So the car was worth $500, right? But even with that, to give that kind of gift, and if there is an in-kind gift like that, again, the United Methodist Foundation of Michigan can help with how to take care of that. So there are lots of things that you might think about that might end up being a charitable gift. And if that happens, be sure that your finance committee has a policy, because if someone says, I'm going to give you my Aunt Clara's Tiffany lamp and I expect to see it in the sanctuary, it's probably not going to happen, right? Well, unless it's really cool. But so often a church will set up a policy that gifts that are given will be sold, so that people understand that that's what we do with these gifts. All right. Another thing that you can do is just think about mutual funds, giving, stocks and bonds, real estate. And you can, I've known people who've done this, who have given their house, their property to the church with a lifetime lease. So they live in the house until they pass, and then the property becomes under ownership of the church. So there are different ways that you can transfer property that way, and that's a way. And the other is the cash value of your life insurance. So there are all kinds of ways you can do this. You could surrender a policy. You could put the policy in the church's name, and the church can surrender the policy, or you can leave it as the church is a beneficiary. And I've got a pamphlet up here, 10 ways that you can use your life insurance. So if you have a little policy, I got a policy I took out when I was 18 years old, little whole life policy, not even paying on it anymore, right? What might I do with that whole life policy? Who could I leave as a beneficiary that would make a profound difference, where it's not really going to make a difference to my heirs, on whether that's there or not. You can give these things, but sometimes these are a little bit harder because jewelry is often worth more than it's appraised at because it has a sentimental value. So you don't want to bring in, your collection of cameos from your grandmother and great grandmother, right? Because it's not going to have that. It's going to have much more sentimental value to that. Art can be difficult to sell. Timeshares are difficult. So usually that's not something the church would accept. And the car, again, think about, the value of the car, but there are ways that a church can sell that and recoup the money. And then you can just claim what the sale price was, right? So some different things to think about. So another way that you can give is by giving upon death. So I'm just going to tell you a few ways that you can do this. One is called a totem trust, which is a payable upon death trust. And this is something you set up with your bank. So your savings account, your checking account, your money market. I'm not sure you can do this with CDs, but maybe. You set up a trust so that upon your death, those things are payable, and they can be payable to the church. So it's just kind of a clean and easy way to set up some accounts that you might have and to do that. You can have life estate agreements. That's where I talked about living on the property, but knowing that the estate will go to the church when you pass away. You can leave the church's beneficiary to retirement accounts, your life insurance policy. And when you offer a bequest, there are all kinds of ways you can do this too. So this is kind of cool to remember. You can say an outright request, like, this is how much I want the church to have from my estate. You can say, I want the church to have the cottage up north from my estate. That would be like a specific asset. You can say, I would like 10%, kind of a tithe, 10% of my estate, the value of my estate, to go to the church, or you might even be breaking that up with other charitable institutions that you know. And then another thing is called a remainder, where you say, I want this much to go to these places, to these heirs, and if there's anything left, that goes to the church. So there are different ways that you can set that up, remembering your church or charitable institution where your heart is. Another thing that you can do, and this is something you can do now, which is kind of cool, George and I have done this, is you can create a donor advised fund. So let's say that you have some stock, you want to cash, you don't want to really take the tax hit, but you're also not ready to give it to the church, okay? You can give it to a charitable investment group like the United Methodist Foundation of Michigan, and David Bell would certainly talk with you about this. You give it to the institution. They establish a fund in your name, a charitable fund, and while that fund, you no longer own it because you're going to get the tax breaks from giving it, you no longer own it, but you get to direct where the money goes. So, for example, George and I, at the end of the year, realized that the food bank that's part of our church had some financial needs. So I called up where our donor advised fund is at the foundation, and I asked that a certain amount of money be mailed to the church. And so they sent a check because we advised where that charitable money went. So it's a way to, let's say this. You've always been interested in establishing a foundation, but you're no Ford, you're no Kellogg, you're not going to have what you need to establish a foundation. You can establish your own advised fund and send those funds to charitable places. They have to be recognized as a 501c3 or a church, right? But they can be sent. Another thing that you might think about is a charitable gift annuity. Now, I have a story about this, and I heard another story that's even better, so I got two. So this is where the donor transfers property or income, and they're interested in creating an annuity that will pay out regularly. All right, so you can establish a charitable gift annuity by giving a gift, again, to a charitable financial institution like the foundation. You can give this gift and work out what payouts you will get on a regular basis. So here's the big story that I told, and I got to tell you this other really cool one that I just heard. Okay, so I was serving in a church and David Bell came and did one of these talks. And I was so disappointed because no one ran up to me afterwards and said, Pastor, I have $100,000. I'm going to give it to you right now. I was so disappointed because, churches could use that. But later on, like about 6 months later, David Bell came and said, I got permission to tell you this story. There's a couple in the church didn't even know they owned a apartment building and they were tired of managing it. They were retired. And so they gave the apartment building to the foundation. The foundation sold it and they invested the money so that it became an annuity for that couple. And today, that couple receives regular income from the annuity without having to pay taxes or manage an apartment building. And when they pass, the balance of that gift will be given to the church. So that's kind of a cool thing. So I'm thinking that's great. Now, I could never do it because I don't own an apartment building. Should we get one? No, okay. But just recently, I heard a story. A woman came up to me and she said, my mom got a small inheritance from her sister. I think it was like, well, I don't know. It's just a small inheritance. And she said she set up one of these annuities. She gave the money to the foundation, and she received a very small amount, like quarterly. So it wasn't a lot, it was a small gift, but gave this over. So she received this gift quarterly, and she lived till she was over 100 years old. And she always felt bad because she earned more than she gave for the gift because she got that for life. So it's not something that's limited to those people who have huge assets. If you've got some money and you want to explore this, there is a pamphlet about this charitable annuity, and you can explore whether this is something you want to do so that you're earning money on that, but you're also have something ready and poised to go to the church upon death. This one is a little bit bigger in assets. So the charitable remainder trust starts at $100,000. Okay, that's the benchmark. So this is a little bit bigger, and I'm not going to go into all the details, but what's cool about this is for people who do have heirs and they want to make a plan with that money that's a little more structured, but they also want the church to be a beneficiary. So this is something you would structure with your financial advisor and your lawyer, but it allows the donor to set up a trust that might give to the church for a number of years and then stop, or it might give to family members or other heirs, and then at a certain point the balance goes to the church. This is a little more complicated, but there are ways out there that you can make great gifts. And the advantage of doing this is that you care for family, but you also remember the church and other charitable institutions that have been good to you. All right, so the question that I hope that you're left with today is not so much, what should I do with that life insurance policy? Not so much that. But the question might be, as faithful people, what will be our legacy? Will we be remembered for generosity? Will we be remembered as a people of hope that know that ministry is counting on us in the name of Jesus Christ, and that we have great hope in that continuing? And will our legacy be something that makes a difference, not only for us, but for future followers of Jesus Christ who we don't even know? We don't know their names, we don't know their stories, but we can make a difference. So I'm at the end. I've left some business cards there that have the main number. I've got here David Bell's cell phone, his direct. Mine's 810-360-9995. His is 3217. I'll leave that up there because if you have a personal question that you want to ask about something I've said about charitable giving, he's your guy and he will get back to you. One of the most gracious people I know, and also certainly discreet and speaks in confidence with people about things. And I want to, for Lyndon and myself, do you have any questions this morning? All righty. Lyndon, is there something I failed to say that you want to make sure gets said? All righty. Yes, got a business card there. I've got some pamphlets. We're changing our logo in a couple months, so I'm down on pens. So you're going to have to run to get a pen, but there they are. So thank you so much. What a pleasure to be with you. Thank you.